Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this episode of 15 photos, one location, I wanted to talk a little bit about the three modes I use most when it comes to photography that kind of cover all situations and occurrences, for me at least. Hopefully this helps some of you with your camera setup. Maybe you're long overdue a custom mode update, or maybe you've never even bothered using custom modes on your camera, so hopefully that will help you out here. Now, this isn't going to be a deep dive into every single function and setting that I use on the camera and what I assign every button to. I'm just going to cover the three modes I use the most for all of my photographs. But if you would like to see a deep dive into every single option and button and stuff that I assign on my cameras, then let me know in the comments and I'll definitely make that video next. But before we jump into that, let's just start with a few photos. As always, I'm going to commentate over them, what went well, what didn't, and we'll talk about these different modes when they fit with the different photographs. So let's get into that. Now, I start off the day by walking along the port area, the pier, I guess you would call it. It's not really a pier, but you know what I mean. And I spot this boat. To be fair, I think this boat's been there for absolute years. I might be wrong, but it makes a nice frame, I think. So I go ahead and frame up a landscape shot, and I notice in the distance there's a couple of cyclists coming along the road or the pier. So I just wait for them to get further enough to be on that right hand side of my frame, and I take a photo here, which is pretty cool. Now, the key thing about this photograph that I'll mention is you'll see there's a guy stood between the two cyclists. So it was all about waiting for the optimum moment to capture him between them, rather than him being overlapping with the bodies of the cyclists. Obviously, I could have used one of the bodies from the cyclists to hide him as well. That would have worked fine. But in this case, I thought it was pretty awesome that there was another person stood exactly in between the two cyclists. I think that works nicely. A little bit of a shame about the van on the right-hand side, but there's nothing I can really do about that unless I went ahead with a square crop, or maybe a 4x5 would get rid of that. But I'm showing the landscape image on this one just because I still quite like it regardless of the van. So having liked that shot a lot there, I decided to grab a quick portrait shot that's more focus on the boat as a whole, with none of that van in the side, and we've got the cones on the floor as well, which is a nice little aspect. That ladder going up I think is pretty interesting and cool, and I like that you've got the text on the side of the boat. So I get that portrait shot just as a second choice, if you will, if I was going to post these anywhere, or if I was making a photo set from the photos. Okay, so before I get on to the third photo for this video, I'm going to talk about my custom modes a little bit, because this one utilizes one of them very, very well, this next shot that's coming up. So basically, I split my modes up. Well, I only really have two custom modes, and then I use manual as well. So I have the three modes that I use, manual, 1 and 2 on the camera, and I call them the slow, medium and fast shooting modes for me and what I like to take photos of and the situations that I tend to be in. Now, manual, obviously no explanation needed. I have absolutely everything in manual, even ISO in manual. And that's for when I'm being really, really slow. There's, I don't need to be fast. There's nothing going on for me to require fast settings. Maybe I'm locked down on a tripod, long exposures, stuff like that I'm really going to take my time over. So the second mode that I use on my A7 IV, well, all of my cameras, I have it assigned to number 1 on the dial on the A7 IV, the A7C II, etc. And this is what I call my medium shooting mode. So it's sort of, I don't need to be super fast, and I'm not posted up dialing in everything manual. So this mode does utilize auto ISO. If I'm walking along and I haven't yet taken a photo on that day, or maybe my camera's completely turned off and I see something's happening, I'll go into number 1 to capture it, rather than going into manual mode and messing around with dialing in my settings, because at least I know with auto ISO I'm going to get a shot that is composed somewhat correctly. My shutter speed and aperture might not be exactly where I want it, but it's always better to take a photo and have it exposed correctly than it is to not get the photo at all and miss the opportunity. And then the third setting I use on my camera, this one I use probably the least out of all of them, so that's why it's number 3, and it's what I call the fast mode on my camera. It's assigned to number 2 on the dial, and the reason I bring this up before this next photo is because this photo was shot utilizing that mode. I'll let the footage run and show the photo, and then I will talk through the mode a little bit. So as you can see, I've framed up this image here, and I'm kind of waiting around a little bit. I like the street sign there, and to the left of me there's 2 people coming along. They walk into the frame there, and I capture this shot here. We get some nice leg motion as always. I did kind of want the two people in the gap, but clearly I was a little bit late on the shutter. I don't mind it though, it's a pretty nice image. I like how the red in the jacket complements the red on the street sign in the distance. So this mode is for fleeting moments, people moving through the scene, street shots, anything like that where I need to be really fast and I need my camera to keep focusing and following my subject of the photograph, just like in this one. So this mode is actually aperture priority, auto ISO. It's using continuous shooting on high, that's the drive mode, which means when I hold the shutter down and press to take a photo, if I keep my hand held down, it's going to continue taking photos over and over and over again until you fill up your space, your buffer on your card, or you release your hand. This mode also utilizes continuous autofocus, which I'm not really a fan of, but I kind of need it in these situations. And along with the fast drive mode, it means it will keep taking photos and keep tracking my subject, refocusing over and over and over again, so that I know that a moving subject through the frame is going to stay in focus and I'm going to keep getting shot after shot, and everything else is on auto apart from the aperture. So the only thing I need to mess around with really when I'm taking a photo is the aperture, but because everything else is in auto, regardless of what my aperture is on, if I don't have time to change it, I'm still going to get a photo that is 0-0 on the light meter, which means I can still do something with it in post. Anyway, having said all that, after that big ramble about the three modes that I use on my camera, let's jump into this next image here. So the reason I really like this sign here, and I'm framing it up, is it's the English Coast Path Trail going south. You can see the green sign on there. Now when I take the photo, you can't really see the text on that sign, but I still like it. I like the way it's framed in between that gap in the background, and little attention to detail thing here that I did. I made the line in the road sign kind of line up with the horizon line there. Something a little bit pleasing for myself. No one's probably going to pick up on that or notice that. Well, you will now, I've told you, but maybe it just helps my OCD, who knows. But anyway, quite like that frame there, nice and simple. And moving on now across the sort of coastal path heading south, I really like this singular golf flag on the golf course. Not really sure why, it's just super minimal. The kind of photo you'd see as an example image for a film camera sort of promotional event or something like that. But anyway, it's flapping away in the wind, so I make sure I get a really fast shutter speed and I take this frame here. Really minimal. I do really like it. It's a strange photo for me to take, pretty random, but I like it. It's nice and minimal, and again, it would back up any major photo that I took on the day. So carrying on over to that hut, walk up to it from the side angle because we've got this path leading up to the bench that's at the side, and then we've got that door. A little bit of a shame about the bin, but what can you do? Nice minimal shot there again. I then decide to come around the other side and get a shot of the side with the bench on. I mean, this would be awesome if there was like a golfer or something sat there, but it was an absolutely dead slow day. So again, shame about the bin on the left hand side, but I'm not going to clone it out for these examples. I'm going to try and leave the images as true as they possibly are. So again, nice minimal shot there. I like the green on green with the bench and the metal bit on the little hut there. So that turned out pretty nice, and I'm pretty happy with those two. So next image here, me and Lupin. By the way, Lupin's with me on this photo walk today. So we go up to this old gunpowder house. I believe that's what it is. Let me do a quick Google actually, because if I've got that wrong, somebody says it's a little grade 2 listed stone hut used to safely store explosives away from the town in the 18th century. So yeah, it is a gunpowder house that was built away from the town, which makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Anyway, back to the photo itself. We clamber up these little rocks here in order to get a nice straight on shot. With a subject like this, I just love the dead simple, straight on, no messing around image. So I take this frame here, and I really like this, to be honest. I like the contrast of the rocks at the bottom and the sort of bright but somewhat moody sky at the top. So I'm going to leave this image on the screen for a minute and explain here why I don't really gel or get along with auto ISO when I'm shooting. For the most part, I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship, because let's say I wanted to deliberately underexpose the sky in this image for either a creative choice or a need, because the sky is so bright, and leave the shadows quite dark because I can bump those shadows up in post. If I expose that so that the sky is then underexposed, Auto ISO is going to automatically then bump my exposure back up to be 00 on the light meter. Now, of course, this is where you would use the exposure compensation dial on your camera in order to still underexpose the image. What's the point in setting something up how I want it composed and the settings that I want for the scene at the time, for auto ISO to then change that and for me to then have to change the exposure compensation? For me, I'd rather just go into ISO and select what I want, especially if I'm taking a creative image that is a creative choice to deliberately massively underexpose the shadows because I want like a huge portion of the image blacked out and a huge portion of it in the light, or vice versa, like this photograph right here. It doesn't make any sense for me to battle against auto ISO when I can just set up those settings how I want them. If I'm not battling against a fleeting moment or a scene that's happening fast and I need to shoot it, then I don't need auto ISO. I've got the time and I've got the patience to set the camera up correctly for my image. So that's why I don't really gel with it. This next image I'm about to take here, I think is a really good example of making a very busy and chaotic scene seem quite organized and nice. So there's no particularly clear sort of subject point here. You could argue it's the life buoy or the no public access sign, but this is a scene where the whole scene is kind of the point of the image, right? So you've got the van backing in up to the lobster cages, you've got the life buoy, you've got the gate down the bottom there, telegraph pole, lamp and everything, and it's all nicely spaced out. The key was making sure all of the sort of busy elements didn't overlap and merge together and create a busy, crazy mess. It's still quite busy and crazy, but it's organized mess. Walking a bit further down the road, I spot the lines on the floor here, and I'm really sorry for the terrible angle of the action camera on my chest here, so you can't really see what's going on. But basically there's these lines along the floor that I really like, leading up to the railing that has the lifeboat access road sign on. And luckily at the right time a bird flies into the frame and I take this image. Quite nice. My only downside to this image, I would say, is the railing on the left is cutting through those boats, but I couldn't really get up any higher to best counteract that and still have the stuff elsewhere in the frame where I wanted them. So not too bad. Just around the corner now then, and I'm walking past these sort of lock-up garage areas where all the fishermen and people that own boats in this area and stuff, I'm guessing they own these to store all their stuff. But again, lobster cages, I'm an absolute sucker for photographing them, so I frame this one up here with the lobster cages on the left catching a nice highlight from the sun on the other side of us, and we've got that nice keep clear 24-hour access required sign on the door. Little bit of that blue barrel on the right hand side, sorry, and I kept a little bit of that in deliberately. Didn't want to include the whole thing and didn't want to cut in too close to the frame, so got a nice little bit of context there. Okay, so at this point I decide to try and avoid the harbour a little bit for a few photos. I head back towards that golf course from before, mainly so I can have a little sit down on the bench and give the dog a drink and stuff, but two people walking towards me through the gate and across the field. So this again is where I use my number 3, my super fast setting, and I wait for them because my camera is completely turned off here, right? So I see them walk off behind me into the distance, swing the camera around, capture this frame, and there we go. Heading back in the direction of the car now. We've got 3 photos left for this video. I see this guy here with his binoculars in a nice red coat, and I quickly take this frame. This was another fast setting on my camera, and this one's a bit awkward. He's kind of on the wrong side of the bench for me. If the bench and the man were swapped around, I think that would be a lot better because he's too far to the edge of the frame and looking in that direction. Whereas if he's on the left hand side and looking in that direction, it's much more powerful in my opinion, but not too bad, not the worst. I like the red contrast in his jacket at least, if I was going to say anything good about the image. Okay, we've got 2 more just to finish up this video then. I grab this shot of the Golden Gate little hut here. This is where you can book cruises to the Farne Islands to see the puffins. So I quite like this, it's just minimal. I do actually like the telephone wires in the top. I know a lot of people are like, never have telephone wires in your images, you must get rid of them. But I like it, it breaks the sky up a bit. I think in the right shot they can do justice to the frame. Not saying it particularly adds or takes anything away, but I do quite like them in this image. So nice, you know, just another image that I would use to back up a photo set or anything like that. And then I go ahead and frame up these 3 huts, 4, 5, there's actually 5 huts in the shot, but there's a guy that walks out between 2 of them, and I just capture him here. Now, this shot is probably my least favorite on the day, because we've got the left and the far left hut and the far right hut that are kind of imposing on the shot, and it's not particularly sort of symmetrical. Now, I'm not saying your shots need to be symmetrical, but when you've got 3 huts lined up like this, I feel like they kind of need to be, to make the frame seem super balanced and nice. Otherwise it's sort of tilted to one side, if you get me. Anyway, hopefully I did a good job of explaining those 3 modes that I use most on my camera for fast and reliable photography that kind of cover most situations for me. We've got the slow, the medium and the fast mode, fully manual but with auto ISO, and then aperture priority with auto ISO and continuous shooting and continuous autofocus. That's going to be it from me in this one. Make sure you comment down below if you do want to see a deep dive into all the settings and the way I have my custom buttons assigned and all of that good stuff. I'll definitely make it. I know it's a bit more of a boring video, that one, but people do seem to be interested in that stuff, so let me know and I definitely will make it if enough of you want it. But having said that, that's going to be it from me. I'll link the playlist to 15 photos, 1 location here, so you can check out all the other episodes and stay up to date with those if you want. But if not, as always, I'll see you in the next one.